Hello and welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast number 97, I think. This is John, and joining me tonight is Ryan.
Hey, hello.
Ryan. Yeah, I jest when I say I think, but this one's been troublesome. If you listen to the podcast regularly, you know that we record every week. We use Hangouts every week, Google Hangouts, thanks Google, and it's never a problem. And this week we had an interview scheduled with Alex Kane, who is the author of the Bossfight Books book about Knights of the Old Republic that's coming out very soon. And so we had that interview scheduled, and this is the one night of the year or of ever that Hangouts decided not to work for us. We used to use Skype, and Skype gave us problems all the time. You could almost set your watch to Skype giving you a podcast recording issue, but Hangouts is like rock solid. Do you agree, Ryan? It's like,
yeah. Yep.
Rock
and then we tried to salvage the interview by getting everyone on Skype, and that didn't work either. So basically, it was amateur hour here at Blockade Runner.
It really was. It really was.
Not a good look.
No. So luckily, Ryan, you were able to kind of just like take control and just make it happen. You know, you were able to bring it home and record a little bit of a shorter interview with again, author Alex Kane, who is publishing the book about Knights of the Old Republic coming out very soon. So we're going to get into that interview here in just a second, and that'll be Ryan and Alex talking about the book, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the book as well, because I read the book this week. I love the book. It's really, really interesting. And what's interesting about me loving the book is that I don't love Knights of the Old Republic. Or I shouldn't say that, I guess, but I've never played it, you know? And so, you know, part of me was thinking, well, how much will I enjoy the book without having, you know, played the game? And if you're out there and you're curious about the book and you haven't played Knights of the Old Republic, I can tell you I found it really, really interesting. And it's a quick read, and it was great. So, but we'll talk more about my thoughts on it and that sort of thing after we go ahead and play the interview between Alex and Ryan. So, sound good, Ryan?
Just a couple caveats to this interview. First of all, I was absolutely not prepared to lead host this interview. I was just gonna be a dude hanging out in the back, like asking a couple questions. John was gonna do the usual hosting duties. So like, if you hear me like stumbling a bit, like apologies. It was like literally after half an hour of tech problems, I was just like, I'm just gonna do this interview.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, that's the thing, Ryan. Ryan is being humble here because he actually taught me how to host a podcast.
Oh.
And so if you have any problems with the way we host the podcast, bring it up with Ryan. But
yeah,
no,
sure.
Ryan was really the first podcast host here, and he could do it in his sleep, I'm sure. But
apparently not.
But we are flustered after 30 minutes
Yeah.
of trying to get this thing going. So.
And like, yeah, I was rolling into this
the
like
issue.
super embarrassed because like we again amateur hour. So just take that into account as you're listening. But I do think it's interesting because I think the interview turned out differently than it would have if you had hosted, John.
Yeah, you were able to cut the dead weight that is me. And
I think like I don't know. Like, I mean, you can be the judge of the interview yourself, but like, I think because I had no idea what I was doing and was basically doing it on the fly. There's a lot of, my interest in like Bethesda and Bioware games in there, and maybe not as much Star Wars talk. So I feel like we'll roll the interview now, and then you and I will, after the interview, cut deep into like the Star Wars part of it, maybe a bit more. Hello, and welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast. I'm Ryan. John is unfortunately unable to join me tonight, but we have a very special guest that I'm going to be talking to, and that is Alex Kane.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming on. So, Alex is about to publish a book about the Star Wars game, Knights of the Old Republic. So, we're going to dive into that. I have read the book. Alex was gracious enough to send me a copy, digital copy. So I have read it, and it's fantastic. And yeah, we're going to just kind of dive into the book and some of our experiences with Knights of the Old Republic. But first, Alex, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the listeners where they may know you from?
Yeah, you may know me from various freelance games journalism projects and StarWars.com. So basically, I, for the last 3 years, have been writing about video games for various outlets like Variety and Rolling Stone and StarWars.com, Polygon a lot recently. And so, yeah, that's sort of what I've been doing the last 3 years, doing some stuff for Lucasfilm at Celebration coming up. So I'm excited about that to kind of cover my first Celebration and check out the Jedi Fallen Order panel. And yeah, that's basically what I do nowadays. So yeah, and then April 9th is when the book comes out. I've been working on that for about 2 years now, to be honest, off and on, as sort of the publishing schedule has like shifted around, and I've had to edit various drafts and like, you know, make a mess of words into a book that people might enjoy. So that's been fun. It's been a fun pet project for a long time now.
Nice. So, speaking of Polygon, congratulations on the Morrowind piece that went up 2 days ago.
Thank you. Yeah, the response has been really nice with that, and that's been really fun. I didn't know if anyone would care to read, 20,000 words about a video game from like 27 years ago or something, and people have really enjoyed that. So hopefully the same thing happens with KOTOR. We'll see, but yeah, I really like that era of gaming, when 3D games and 3D RPGs were starting to get good, so to speak. They were really and Knights of the Old Republic, of course, was sort of the act that had to follow Morrowind on the Xbox. And yeah, Morrowind was very fun to dig into, and that story had never quite been told before. So yeah, it's surreal. I can't believe that like I got to do that and that people are enjoying it. It's really nice.
Yeah, it was funny because when that story was published, it was like blowing up my Twitter feed, and like I follow Polygon and stuff on Twitter, and I was like, oh, of course I'd like to read an oral history of Morrowind. And then I didn't even realize it was you who wrote it until I clicked on it.
Amazing. So very cool.
So that was really cool. Yeah, that's a game I love, as well as KOTOR. So I guess, how did you end up focusing like the last 2 years on writing this book for Bossfight Books?
So I went freelance in 2014. I sort of like had a bank job for 5 years that I was doing when I was in college. And then I took a writing workshop in 2013 with like these amazing writers that are like my idols. And I thought I was going to be, maybe the next like Stephen King or something. That did not happen. Turns out that people are a lot better at fiction than I am. And I just I was like, you know what, I'm going to take a break from that. I'm going to work on the publishing side. And I did various freelance like editing gigs. I was sort of the managing editor of this tiny press that published books about movies. The founder of that press eventually ghosted me and all the authors and fell off the face of the planet, and that press no longer exists. And so I sort of had to scramble to figure out what I was going to do next. And so I guess it would have been around that time, or roughly around that time that I was pitching boss fight ideas. I pitched them a book on Halo 2, and they said, oh, this is an excellent pitch, but let's say no for now. We have a lot of good projects lined up. Like, maybe circle back in a year and touch base again. Maybe throw a new pitch our way. So in May 2016, give or take, I pitched them a book on KOTOR, and in October, so like 5 months later, like right before Halloween, Gabe says, hey, call me up on this date at this time. I'd like to talk to you. And he basically said, would you rather write a book about Halo 2 or would you rather write a book about KOTOR? Well, around that time would have been roughly around the time of like Twilight of the Apprentice episode and Rebels. It would have been right around the time of Rogue One, you know, this amazing time for Star Wars, you know, before The Last Jedi, you know, and it was like kind of a no-brainer to choose, you know, like Halo 2 had its 10-year anniversary already like 2 years before that. So that ship had kind of sailed for me in terms of like timeliness and excitement. And I think you know, there's just more to say about KOTOR. And again, like the Morrowind thing, that story had never really been told, certainly not at book length. So, yeah. And by that point I had clips to show that, you know, hey, I can write about games and not completely embarrass myself, hopefully. So, and they took a chance on me. Big credit to them, because in October 2016, when I signed that contract, I was not equipped to write a book about one single video game. So my sort of the crazy part of the journey is sort of that, you know, I've been doing freelance games journalism pretty much nonstop since I signed the contract, and sort of learned how to write this book as I was doing it. Very sort of, what's the Indiana Jones quote? Like, I don't know, I'm just making it up as I go along. That was certainly the process of writing this book, and it was very messy. And yeah, I can't believe that it turned out as well as it did, because let me tell you, those first 2 or 3 drafts were not anything a human being should ever have to look at. Let's put it that way.
Well, I mean, it definitely turned out really well. I, you know, basically read it in one sitting. And yeah, that it was, you know, as a Star Wars fan and as a video game fan, like it was perfect. For me.
Thank you so much. That's awesome.
I do still want to read the book on Halo 2.
Oh,
or
no.
like it. So just throwing that out there, I would definitely go pick that up. But so the Morrowind piece and the KOTOR book, they're both kind of oral histories.
Yep, sort of. Yep. Yeah, I think that the Morrowind one is completely oral history, and then the KOTOR one is sort of like the J.W. Rinsler making of Star Wars, where it's basically an oral history. The Art of the Last Jedi was a big direct influence on what I wanted this book. You know, I really like The Art of the Last Jedi, The Art of the Force Awakens, etc. By Phil Shostak. His 4 books about the making of those 4 Disney era films are fantastic. Those were direct influences to kind of how I wanted to make the KOTOR book. But I was also reading things like Carrie Fisher's books at the time when I was really sinking my teeth into this. I was reading, you know, shortly after her death, you know, and I was really sinking my teeth into things like The Disaster Artist, and these books that kind of tell like the wild human story behind things and sort of an intimate level. I was like, it'd be amazing to kind of hit the sweet spot between those 2 styles. And I guess hopefully that's kind of how KOTOR ended up feeling. But it's difficult, you know. I mean, it's hard to get people to open up about, hey, you used to work for George Lucas and you know, work on these crazy projects under these insane conditions. You know, tell me all about it, right? So, I mean, and it happened, you know, 15, 16 years before I wrote the book, so people's memories are fuzzy. But yeah, that's. I think was that the right answer to your question. I've rambled.
Sure. I don't think there is a right answer, but you know, we love those art of books by Phil. On here, I think we've recorded a podcast about every one of those books. So that's really cool. I didn't make that connection when I was reading the KOTOR book, but sure. I can totally see it now.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So in a way, like this book tells the story of Knights of the Old Republic and how that game was made, but it also feels like a book about the transition within Bioware, going from like a pure PC like D&D game developer to making that transition to like, you know, other kind of settings in their games, and also like 3D, and like really kind of breaking into the mainstream on consoles. Did it
Yeah.
did you kind of see that as you were writing?
So since you framed it the way you did, I went to Bioware Edmonton in Canada in January, and I wrote a cover story for Polygon about Anthem and basically they're going through one of those transitions now as well, I believe. You know, a lot of people would probably say so. You know, it'll be interesting to see later on how it feels in retrospect, but basically, it seems like they've had two of those big pivot points in their history, one of which is happening as we speak, and one of which happened, they made Neverwinter Nights, they made KOTOR, and then they made Mass Effect, and that sort of trilogy, right? Well, actually, Jade Empire happened.
Jade
before.
Empire was in there as well, but everyone forgets about Jade Empire,
that's
even though it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's sort of... it's, you know, it was less of a leap, I guess, because it's sort of like the KOTOR engine with like some combat enhancements and like different physics that they probably would have loved to use in the Star Wars game, but just weren't able because they had, you know, tight squeeze at the end. But that was certainly a turning point in their history. They were going from with Neverwinter Nights, which was basically happening as pre-production on KOTOR was happening. You know, they sort of had two teams internally working on those two projects. They were shifting from 2D to 3D essentially. They were just basically building all this new tech and learning how to use it. You know, I've watched like Let's Plays and stuff of Neverwinter Nights. I haven't really played Neverwinter Nights yet. It's coming out. It's coming out on like current consoles like later this year, I believe. So I'm excited to like get all those older games and play them. But yeah, basically, you know, LucasArts hired them and thought, you know, maybe they'll make like Baldur's Gate 3 with lightsabers, right? You know, Baldur's Gate with lightsabers, and that was kind of the thinking when Simon Jeffrey, the president at LucasArts, contacted them. And, you know, they had Neverwinter Nights going on, and James Olin, who recently left BioWare, like about, you know, last year, I believe, like 6 months ago or something, you know, it was sort of his grand vision, right? That like, we'll make the game that is closer to a Star Wars film than any game has been before. It'll be this sprawling RPG, you know, I mean, you got to hand it to them. Like they came closer to achieving their goals than most of the games from that period in terms of you know, something on that scale. Like it truly was one of the first blockbusters, like alongside like Halo and you know, things like that. Morrowind, Halo 2. If you can call Morrowind a blockbuster, it's not quite, but you know, it was a very mainstream, massively ambitious hit.
Yeah, and like KOTOR, I didn't realize that, but like the BioWare developers were talking about how they were coming out in the shadow of Morrowind because it was kind of like a surprise hit on Xbox.
Yeah, I don't know like how much they were sort of worried about Morrowind as far as but certainly like that seems to be, you know, Morrowind was like the first big RPG to hit the Xbox that people, you know, I remember like having family members who were like, you know, or friends or whatever who liked RPGs, and they're like, well, the Xbox doesn't have any RPGs. Well, and then 2002 and 2003, you know, after the Halo hype settled down and those came out, you know, it was like, oh, the Xbox definitely has a couple RPGs and they are fantastic. So yeah, I don't know how much Morrowind was weighing on their minds necessarily in terms of like, but it must have been, you know, it must have been to some extent, because that would have been their competition on the Xbox at least. But they're two very different games at the same time. You know, I like to compare and contrast them because they were sort of back-to-back RPG hits on the Xbox at a time when, you know, I was really falling in love with games like never before at the time. So, you know, I sort of came from the Mario Nintendo childhood with, you know, Mario Brothers 3 and the N64 and things like that, you know, Ocarina of Time. So Morrowind and KOTOR were really like on another level in a lot of ways.
Would you consider them almost part of a trilogy? This is kind of the way I've always thought about those games, like Morrowind, KOTOR, and Fable.
Oh, Fable.
As like the defining Xbox RPGs.
So I haven't played Fable. I want to play like at least the anniversary edition at some point. It's been calling out to me every time I browse the Xbox store, kind of seeing it, what's backward compatible. But I sort of read a bunch about it, right? Because I was like an official Xbox magazine subscriber. I was Electronic Gaming Monthly subscriber at the time, and yeah, Fable was a big deal. I think it sort of, maybe not borrowed, but it did some things that KOTOR did also, I think, right? Like it had the sort of morality system that like Mass Effect wound up having. And yeah, so I've always just read about Fable and kind of the ups and downs it had. But yeah, I never got around to playing it, but I'm certain that the Xbox team probably felt that way, that it was kind of a trio of sorts, right?
Yeah, I'd be super interested to hear your thoughts if you ever do play Halo or Fable.
Oh yeah,
because like you're so well versed in Morrowind and KOTOR at this point. Yeah, and I also like really don't know how Fable feels in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the anniversary edition is pretty gorgeous looking at screenshots, but yeah, it's always interesting going back to those older games like Morrowind, you know. Morrowind is really, it hurts when you recommend Morrowind to someone who's never played it, right? Because then you tell them it is the greatest RPG ever made or whatever you want to say, and then they get it, and they're like, Skyrim was better, and it's kind of like, ouch, oh my heart. But
or they like get killed in like the first 10 minutes of Morrowind, which definitely can easily happen.
Yeah, the combat was probably the weakest point in that game. Whereas KOTOR, on the other hand, arguably the combat was incredible in KOTOR. I find that Mass Effect 1 actually, for all its many, many, many pros and merits, like Mass Effect's combat almost feels like a big step back from KOTOR, because KOTOR it had the D&D systems running under it basically, and it was turn-based and just smooth and kind of breezy to pick up and play, right? And Mass Effect tried to do the shooter thing. It tried to do a little bit of Gears of War kind of third-person cover shooter stuff, and yeah, I don't know. It's always interesting going back to old games, and I think that if you didn't play it back around release time, it can often be disappointing just because of the nature of the medium, right? Like it's a form that is constantly evolving and being iterated upon, and I myself, I fired up Morrowind like the day that my oral history came out, and I played it for a little while. And then I turned it off and played Skyrim, and I was like, "Oh, what did I just do? What is wrong with me?" And yeah, so I mean, that's the nature of these things. Most people will say KOTOR is the greatest Star Wars game ever, but if somebody picks it up today, they might not make it through it. I mean, which is sad, but
yeah, I had fully intended on doing a playthrough before I actually read your book. But as is always the case with those sort of things in adulthood, I did not get the opportunity, but I did play about 15 hours of it, so not a full playthrough, but nice. I revisited it on the Xbox One X, which actually Morrowind, KOTOR, and Fable Anniversary Edition are all enhanced to 4K on that system, which it does make for pretty clean visuals. But I definitely think KOTOR still holds up if you kind of let yourself play by its rules. Because it is think of it as like a video game version of a Star Wars tabletop RPG. And then if you approach it that way, not expecting Mass Effect 3 or anything, or Witcher 3 or whatever else, but if you approach it like that, I think it holds up really well.
Yeah, and that's all by design, I think. I think they all wanted to make the Weston game Star Wars RPG, basically, in video game form, and relive their childhoods and kind of, or their teenage years, and kind of, and that's kind of how you have to play it. You have to be like, this is my character. I'm going to really sort of settle into this world and take my time. And that's easier said than done sometimes when life gets busy and stuff. But yeah, it's a nice fantasy. I don't think it's hard to say that it's ever been topped since, in terms of like a video game that just lets you hang out in the Star Wars universe for like 20 hours or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Old Republic.
Yeah,
the MMO came pretty close, but that's also, it has a lot of the MMO tropes that kind of break the illusion in a way, I guess. But I remember playing KOTOR for the first time, and I came from like the Bioware PC games. Like, I was really into like Baldur's Gate 2 especially, and like when I first saw KOTOR, I was like, is this the same developer? Like this is amazing. Like, how did you go from like these, top down like games that basically look like Warcraft 2 to all of a sudden like this beautiful 3D game? And in 2003 on the Xbox, it was like really beautiful.
Yeah. And it's funny how that there's sort of that taking up of the mantle, right? Like the way that Obsidian has kind of taken the mantle of like BioWare in some respects, or Bethesda in some respects over the years. Like BioWare kind of seems to have done that a little bit with like, some of those old 2D games. Like they were big like Blizzard fans and big fans of like all the Ultima stuff and D&D games. So it's neat to see these studios rise up and kind of, I haven't really gotten to sink my teeth into The Witcher yet, but I mean that's one of those. I think Larian Studios, who did like Divinity Original Sin and the second one, like they're sort of getting to live out that sort of BioWare idea, from the book, where it's like get to take over the world for a little while and be top of the RPG game, which I mean BioWare got to do that for a long time. I think they started with Baldur's Gate being a big bestseller, and then they had KOTOR, they had the whole Mass Effect trilogy, they had Dragon Age 1. Yeah. So even though they're kind of experiencing a low point in their history right now, of people being kind of disappointed in Anthem in a lot of ways, it's like, I kind of have faith that the next Dragon Age will kind of, bring them back into people's favor a little bit, hopefully. But, there's still some brilliant people there. But
yeah, I mean, Casey Hudson appears a lot in your book. He was heavily involved in KOTOR, and he's like the project lead on Anthem. So like, they do still have some people from this era. Yeah,
it's interesting. I interviewed him twice before the book, went to print and all that, and neither time was really for the book. But I was able to cite one of the interviews in the book a fair amount, like a few times, where I had interviewed him for StarWars.com about KOTOR's anniversary. So I just kind of lucked out with the timing there. But
oh, nice.
And then I interviewed him again about Anthem in the future and things like that for the Polygon cover story, which is sort of like, if anyone wants to look that up at some point, The State of BioWare is what it wound up being called. And that might be kind of an interesting sequel to the book, in some ways. If you listen to this after April 9th and pick up the KOTOR book, The State of BioWare at Polygon might act as like a sort of little coda to the book in some ways, hopefully.
I actually missed that when it came out, so I will definitely have to check that out.
Very cool.
I'm also currently playing Anthem, so
amazing.
Cool. Okay, I know like I could talk about this stuff forever, but I know you got a jet soon. I will, listeners who are considering picking up the book, like I will say, like, obviously there are spoilers for the game.
Yep.
If you haven't played the game, if you're a Star Wars fan and you're open to very different sort of RPG, I would say, play the game first and then read the book. But I think, what would you say, Alex, to like people who maybe never played the game, but like Star Wars and like Lucas history?
Well, this is all legend stuff. There are things from KOTOR 1 and 2 that are sort of cropping up again and again in the films and in the TV shows. I think Filoni is probably a big KOTOR fan. I don't think he's really been good at hiding that. Stuff comes up in modern Star Wars canon stuff all the time, and that's amazing. But, there are some people who just don't want to play a game for 20 hours. And to those people, I would say, go to YouTube, and there are these amazing videos. They're probably like 2 or 3 hours long, maybe. And you can, maybe not even that long, but I think if you type in like Knights of the Old Republic full movie, you can find videos where people have captured all the key story beats in one video in chronological order. And those are really nice. And I actually used that occasionally if I needed to sort of write about a story beat, but I didn't want to fire up the Xbox and play for half an hour because I was deep into writing mode, and you know what I mean? So it's like, I just wanted to quote something Bastila says. I would reference that video, and yeah, you can really get a good chunk of the experience out of those sort of like Let's Plays or the abridged Let's Plays where they just take the key moments and put it together like a movie. And it's a beautiful game, and the story is fantastic, but maybe you're just not someone who plays games, and that's okay. I think if my book does anything well, it's that, you get to kind of peek behind the curtain of a very specific time in both Star Wars and video game history and see what it's like to work for a company that is beholden to any word that George Lucas says, right? And kind of, there's some fun anecdotes in there about Attack of the Clones is being made, and Samuel L. Jackson gets to have a purple lightsaber, but George Lucas didn't really want anybody else to have anything that wasn't blue or green, right? So there's some fun stuff about things like that where LucasArts maybe had to kind of like fight for, the game to be, this sort of, choose your own adventure, be the kind of Jedi you want to be experience. But yeah, the opening introduction, the author's note at the start of the book does spoil the big, I am your father twist of the game. And there is one. So yeah, if you don't like games, check out one of those YouTube videos. But, I recommend the game to anybody who thinks they might enjoy it. If you think you might enjoy a Star Wars game, you'll definitely enjoy that one.
Yeah, I would say like the influence of this game in Star Wars history, like it's right up there with, the animated series, like the Thrawn trilogy, like maybe even some of the movies. I don't know, but like it still has a very, very strong influence today, and I think it's something that like all Star Wars fans, if you're trying to just learn everything about Star Wars, like it's an important part, even if you're not interested in the games.
Yeah. Everybody who played it that went on to work at Lucasfilm, like they still love it, and there are people working in the games team at Lucasfilm. There are people working on the animation side that either worked on Star Wars video games or they're big fans of games like Knights of the Old Republic, and it's forever in Star Wars DNA, whether canon or not. It is Legends, it is expanded universe stuff, but they're like pieces from it will forever crop up in Star Wars, I believe. Looking at Rogue One and Rebels, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, any final words that you have going into the book's launch?
Man, I hope people have fun with it. I'm somebody who I really get into that behind the scenes stuff. So hopefully that came across in the way that I present the story in the book. If I had the choice between, I go to the bookstore and I have, $10 to blow on a book or $20 to blow on a book, I would much rather get an art book or a behind the scenes book than like a novel sometimes. That's just it's delicious to read about, Rian Johnson's process of making The Last Jedi, or Doug Chang's thought process designing some spaceship in Rogue One. That stuff, because of my age and what I do and the things that I grew up enjoying, things like the episode 1 documentary, the beginning, like that's very, very much my bag. That's what I love about Star Wars is George Lucas walking into a room and breaking stuff and making magic. That's the part that I really care about. So hopefully I captured some piece of that in the book. But
absolutely, and I think that's why the book resonated so much with me. Like, I'm a Bioware fan. I'm a huge behind the scenes of Star Wars fan. We just recorded like 3 episodes ago in an episode about the beginning.
Oh, amazing.
So we watched it again and recorded all about it. That's completely our jam. So this book is, John had never even played KOTOR, and I'm bummed he couldn't be here for this episode. But I'm going to try to record a little something with him just to, get his thoughts. He read the book in just like me in basically one sitting, and he really liked the book despite never playing the game. So,
I love hearing that. That's a great compliment.
So I think that's a testament to, like, if you're a Star Wars fan, like, you're going to dig this.
Very cool. I love hearing that. And feel free to, discuss the book when I'm not here, and you guys can just talk about the game and stuff without me as well. So, and your real thoughts on the book too, like if you want to go in depth, that'd be awesome. Or, but yeah, when I'm definitely going to go listen to the episode about the beginning, because I did not catch that you guys did one on that. I'll definitely listen to that tonight. That's awesome.
Oh, thanks. Cool. So, Alex, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Alex J. Kane, and you can find me writing about Celebration at StarWars.com, or writing about whatever video game I decide to dive into next for Polygon, hopefully in the near future as well.
Nice. Hopefully we'll get a chance to say hello in person at Celebration.
Oh, you guys are going awesome. Excellent.
Yeah,
I'll be there running around. I'll be at the Fallen Order panel for sure. A couple other panels.
Yes.
Really excited.
Nice. It's going to be a big one this year.
Yeah, a lot of Star Wars coming out.
Yeah. All right. Well, Alex, thank you so much for, sharing the book with us ahead of time. Thanks for, coming on the show. And I highly encourage everyone who listens to this show to check out the book when it comes out in bookstores and digitally on April 9th.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. This was great fun.
All right, so we're back from the interview with author Alex Kane. Knights of the Old Republic is the book, and it's coming from Bossfight Books. Ryan, what's the release date on this?
April 9th.
April 9th. Okay, cool. Yeah, so it was really cool to have the opportunity to read the book a little bit ahead of its release, and Ryan and I both read it this week. And like I was saying before the interview, I've never played Knights of the Old Republic. I've maybe played like half an hour, 45 minutes of it or something on a cell phone. Like there's a mobile port, I think. Mm-hmm. And I played a little bit of that. And it's not that I didn't like it, but it was, it's not really the kind of game that I play too often. So Ryan kind of set up this interview with Alex, and I followed these Bossfight books. I have not actually read one before. I don't know if you've read any of them, Ryan.
Yeah, I've only actually read one. I read Chris Kohler's Final Fantasy V book. But, like, this is something, even though I've already read the book, like, this is something that's definitely going to go on my Star Wars shelf. Like, I'm definitely going to purchase a physical copy of this and, like, add it to the collection.
Yeah, I'm going to grab it too, for sure. I think it's really cool. And if listeners are familiar with the 33 1/3 series, which is sort of small, sort of novella-sized books about a certain album, so those books are great. And I think that those are fairly well known, at least among nerds and stuff, so I've read a couple of those, and those are really cool. And so I think these boss fight books are sort of the video game equivalent of that. Is that fair to say, Ryan?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, because also with the 33 and a third books, they differ in tone. Some are more personal, some are more of an oral history, which is definitely closer to what this KOTOR book is. And Alex and I do talk, well, if you're listening to this, we did talk about like kind of the art of writing oral histories a bit in there. But yeah, like no, they're pretty analogous, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean the 33 and a third, one of my favorite ones is the Smiths one, and that is actually like written as a piece of fiction. It's like a story that just centers around that album being like a focal point. So yeah, they're different. So they don't have to follow the same blueprint, but the idea is you kind of devote this, slim little book to sort of the essence, I guess, of whatever the piece is that it's focused on. So anyway, I haven't played Knights of the Old Republic. I'm kind of familiar with the idea of this sort of book. I've been following the Bossfight Books releases, although I hadn't actually read any of them yet. Yeah, so I was excited, but also kind of thought, well, I haven't played this game. And as Ryan, just kind of pointed out, and as these guys talk about in the interview, because it's sort of an oral history of how the book, how the game came together. It's just really, really fascinating and really interesting to read, regardless of if you are familiar with the game or not. And in fact, like, to me, it was almost maybe more interesting that I hadn't. Not more interesting, I shouldn't say that, but it served a different purpose for me, I think, because I haven't played the game. Because what it ended up doing is sort of like, it made me feel like I understand the game, and it made me feel like I understand why people love the game and why the game is important. And it did all that without me having to put, like, I don't know how many tens or even, hundreds of hours into playing that game.
About
which is 40 hours. Okay. So like, I don't know that I was ever going to do that, like I probably wasn't ever going to do that. And so then that's like this hole in my, sort of understanding of Star Wars culture and the Star Wars fan base, in fan community and all that. And so, obviously reading this book doesn't replace that experience of playing the game, but it really does make me feel like I understand sort of the appeal of the game and the qualities of the game and that sort of thing, even though it's not necessarily the kind of game that I want to play at this point. So, I mean, that right there, I think is makes it worth the price of admission, and worth the time to go through the book. Although again, it's a brief read, which is great too. I read it in a couple of afternoons, reading for 45 minutes at a time, something like that, and I was done with it. So, yeah, it's good. It's a quick read, super, super interesting. You learn a lot about LucasArts and what the company was like at that time, and there's a lot of discussion in the book also of sort of what the mentality was around the expanded universe at that time, and how they were sort of bringing Star Wars back with the prequels, but then there was all these games that were sort of like not really directly associated with the prequels, and how those games usually were better than the ones that were directly associated with the prequels. And so, yeah, I mean, the whole story is super compelling, and not to belabor the point, as I know you guys talked about it, but the structure of the book and the style of the book being sort of an oral history, you're just hearing so much from the developers and the talent behind the game, and it's sort of kind of the book is Alex using these interviews to kind of shape this story. And so, but you're hearing a lot straight from the development team, which is really interesting as well.
Yeah. So something that Alex cited as an influence, which if you're listening to the podcast, you've already heard the interview part, but John, like, you obviously haven't, because we're recording this directly after Alex and I had our conversation. So a primary influence for writing the book was Phil Stosak's art of books. That was really what inspired like the approach that he took to writing it, because like just like us, he's a huge fan of those art of books, which again we've said 1,000 times on this show, like buy those books, read those books, and you will understand Star Wars, especially in the Disney era. Like it's just like mind-blowing.
Well, and that's really interesting because like to me those books would be super fascinating to read regardless of if you've seen the movie they're made about. You know what I mean? They're incredible, and there's so much to that story, and just to like I just love the opportunity to sort of get into the heads and the mindset of the creative people that put these projects together. So yeah, that's it doesn't surprise me at all to hear that, you know, that there's some inspiration from that, because it really does kind of achieve the same sort of outcome, I think, in terms of you know, just telling a fascinating tale of how a great piece of art is created. Though I don't know if I'm ready to say Knights of the Old Republic's a great piece of art or not, but you know, I don't have an opinion because I haven't played it.
Yeah, so I want to I'm going to lead into a question for you. But this was something like I'm about to share an anecdote, which I definitely did not want to share when I was talking to Alex. But funny thing about Knights of the Old Republic. So when I was first playing the game and I was super into it, I was playing it at home one night, and you and I were working together at a children's museum. And
yeah.
I think you know what the story is.
No, I don't. I have a really bad memory, but I just I'm already laughing at the idea of us working together at DC.
Yeah, so we were working together, but we weren't really like hanging out or anything. We knew that we shared, and this is like 2003, like late 2000 or late 2003. We knew we were into some of the same music, like Saddle Creek stuff, and we had mentioned like Star Wars and video games probably, but that was kind of the extent of it. And we had just kind of like casually talked about that stuff at work. But I remember very specifically, I was at home playing KOTOR. It was my first playthrough, and I was so into it. Like, just I was just blown away and in love with the game. And this is back pre-cell phones. So then I was down there playing KOTOR, and my mom was like, "Hey, you have a phone call." And it was, so like I went upstairs, because this is how life used to work. I went upstairs and like got on the phone, and it was you. And you were like, "I'm having some people over to watch the Laserdisc version of Empire Strikes Back. Do you want to come over?" And I was like, yes. But I do remember I was like in the middle of like a KOTOR session.
Oh, okay.
And that was like the first time we hung out.
Okay.
And that was like, yeah, that was the Laserdiscs. Like, you having those was a really big deal. Like, it was a drop everything you're doing and go to the stranger's apartment and play this and watch this. So yeah.
Yeah, no, okay, so then I do know that story. I just didn't know the KOTOR part, but yeah, I did know that the first time we kind of hung out was watching a Star Wars Laserdisc. So man, that's funny. That's really funny, especially the idea that like having that Laserdisc was so like sort of exclusive or whatever, like so impressive. So nice.
Yeah, so I was like, yeah, I'll save my game and drive half an hour over to your place, because man, I got to see this.
Yeah,
I'd never seen those laser discs before.
It didn't disappoint either, did it?
No.
No.
So with that said, so KOTOR is like a pretty important game to me. Not because you called me while I was playing it, but just because I love Bioware. Like, I was a big Xbox fan at the time, still am, and like, it's important to me, and it's always been at, like, not necessarily the forefront of my Star Wars fandom, but like, it's always been present, and it's always been one of those kind of things when people are like, talking about like, oh, what are your favorite Star Wars video games or whatever? Like, it's, it's the Factor 5 games and KOTOR, basically. So I feel like a little bit biased when talking about the game, but as like an outsider, what do you feel like the legacy of this game is within like Star Wars fandom? Do you feel like it's something that's important?
Yeah, I do, but more so now after reading the book than I did previously. I'll tell you what, really the biggest impression it ever made on me was when The Force Awakens was coming out, like the lead up to The Force Awakens, because so many people were talking about Darth Revan this and Darth Revan that, and I was just like, who is this nerd that you guys are talking about? And like, why do you think anybody cares about some video game character from 10 years ago when we're getting our first new Star Wars movie in 10 years? You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't care at all, but I knew that it was something that people cared about, and I knew that it had like a good reputation, but that's about as far as it went. And then when people kept talking about Darth Revan, honestly, I got kind of annoyed by that, and I was just like, they're not going to resurrect a character from some old video game to be the focal point of a new Star Wars trilogy. Like, that's not happening, which I still feel pretty strongly about. But no, after reading the book, and even, just like, I feel like in the last couple of years, just as a person, I've gotten a little more open-minded about stuff that I'm not, particularly compelled by myself. You know what I mean? So, I think I've probably come around a little bit on the idea that it's an important kind of part of Star Wars lore. And here's the thing: I've never been a huge Legends person anyway, but I think seeing the Legend stories be decanonized isn't the right word because they were never canon, but having them sort of like distinctly separated from, canon storytelling going forward or whatever, like watching that happen and seeing how much people cared about those stories and not the people that are obnoxious about it, but just hearing from people that really love like those Star Wars Legend stories and that sort of thing. And now that universe is sort of like bookended and wrapped up and everything, I feel like I have more respect for it as a result of that, So then that kind of opens me up to being more interested in Knights of the Old Republic or respecting it more, I guess, or viewing it as important. But yeah, just reading the book though, and hearing about sort of how people responded to it. And especially, I had the book with me, and then I put it downstairs when we had our fiasco recording session. I don't have the chapter titles in front of me, but I think it's the last chapter, or the second to last chapter, is sort of really about the legacy of the book, and hearing about people naming their kids Revan, and the number of KOTOR cosplayers and stuff that are still out there, and just like how much the creators still hear from people about the game and the characters. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely seems to, like, after reading this book, I feel like it's got to be top 10% like most important Star Wars video games, like, period. You know what I mean? Right up there with like Atari Star Wars, and maybe like the Super Star Wars games, and Shadows of the Empire, and probably that's about it. Maybe Pod Racer,
Rogue Squadron.
Yeah, Rogue Squadron. Yeah, well, but those games are more just like pure story. Pure like gameplay kind of thing, more so than, you know what I mean? Although I guess that's true of a lot of
X-Wing and TIE Fighter.
Yeah.
Important.
Yeah. And like I always say, like something like Atari Star Wars or even Super Star Wars is just more like the cultural impact, you know what I mean? And sort of the way, kind of people responded to it in that regard. So, but yeah, anyway, I feel like I definitely have a lot more respect for it after reading the book. And I feel like it definitely, in my mind, has sort of cemented its place in like importance in the Star Wars culture.
Yeah. And I mean, to like kind of talk more about the legacy, and this is kind of outside of the pages of the book. Um, as there's, I mean, KOTOR has been in the news like this week in Star Wars news for, the Game of Thrones creators, their Star Wars film trilogy. Somewhere, someone came up with, I don't know if it's a rumor or got some information, whatever, that it was going to be, those films were going to be set in the Old Republic era.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the kind of the logical choice. Like if you were going to make Star Wars films set in more of this, like, I don't know, how would you even describe like the Old Republic era? Like it almost feels like medieval, primitive. There's like a degree of politics in there. Like it seems like, that's, if you were going to kind of resurrect this, like that's who you'd get to do it.
Yeah. Well, so that story was from, as far as I know, it originated with Star Wars Newsnet, and I will try to link to that in the show notes. But it's one of those stories that's really interesting because it's like, without commenting at all, because I don't have any sort of like skeptical or negative feelings towards the site that reported or anything like that. So, I don't want to make it sound that way at all, but without commenting on their role in it, because I'm sure it's valid and, coming from a legitimate place and everything, but it just reads like the kind of story that it's like, to me, I'm like right down the middle on it, because I'm like, I could totally see that being 100% accurate, but then on the other hand, it's like, it's also the most obvious story ever. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
if somebody wanted to like, hoax a news site, or if somebody wanted to kind of scam somebody or whatever, like I could write that story without talking to anybody, and I'm not saying that they would, that site would do that. I'm not saying that at all, but it's just one of those things where you read it and you're like, it totally seems like it could be real. Also totally seems like just, it's so logical that, it almost writes itself. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the weird thing with that story. And it'll just be so like, I would be thrilled if we found out at Celebration what either the Game of Thrones guys are doing or what Rian Johnson is doing for their movie series. Either one of them or both of them would be really exciting to find out about. But man, if we were to find out that they're doing a series of movies about the Old Republic, I almost asked myself, well, what does that mean exactly? If they said, well, we're doing about the Old Republic, does that mean they're going in and going to kind of mine Knights of the Old Republic? And that's another thing I was curious about, to talk to Alex about, or to talk to both of you guys about, or I guess maybe to research and find out more about on my own. But as I was reading the book, I was wondering, because there's some discussion of Dark Horse and the comics that had been out and that sort of thing. And it's like, I was wondering, well, how much influence did those comics have on the development of the game? And then after the game came out and was this huge hit and really kind of made this impact on the Star Wars community, like we just got done talking about, how much influence did the game end up having on future Dark Horse stories about the Old Republic? And I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if you can really speak to that, Ryan, or if it's kind of nebulous or what, but
sort of. I mean, I would say like Knights of the Old Republic, the video game, draws like lore from the Tales of the Jedi and that like Dark Horse series. It also draws from the Weston Games role playing for the lore. I think, I just not just, but a few months ago, I revisited like the first couple volumes of the Tales of the Jedi comics from like the mid 90s, and those feel tonally completely different than how I think Knights of the Old Republic the game feels. So I think they like mostly pulled lore from it and then made it into like basically Knights of the Old Republic feels like an entire Star Wars trilogy in like a game. And then I would say like the legacy afterwards would be, you know, there's plenty of books that came out, many by Drew, can't say his last name, Bioware guy who, you know, wrote on Knights of the Old Republic. I think he did some Mass Effect writing as well. But I would say that the 2000s era Knights of the Old Republic comic from Dark Horse, which I think was John Jackson Miller wrote, that feels more in line with like how the game feels. I think I remember, I haven't read that comic in a very long time, but I was reading it as it was coming out. And I remember being like, yeah, this is, you know, this is that same sort of vibe. It was like different characters and stuff, but it had the same sort of vibe. And I think that vibe carried over into the MMO, which is just called The Old Republic. And that's, again, by BioWare. And, you know, that spawned its own set of lore, but it also brought in a lot from Knights of the Old Republic as well. It actually brought in like some of the characters and stuff. So, I do think, you know, and like the Old Republic, like that, talk about like a nebulous state between canon and legends. That game exists right there because they're still creating story beats for it and like story sections, but like
it was developed pre-canon reset, right?
Yeah, but like it's still going. That's like an interesting place to be. But I feel like, and I, you know, I said this in the interview with Alex, I feel like Knights of the Old Republic is right up there, like legends wise, with, you know, the most popular and famous of the legend stuff. Like, you know, you think about like Crimson Empire and the Thrawn trilogy. Like, I would say like KOTOR is right there. And, you know, we saw what Disney did with Thrawn, like those really crucial touch points of the Legends canon. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's never gonna make it into like the Disney Star Wars canon, but like the cream is going to make it rise to the top. Is going to make it into this new canon because like it's too good not to. Like, I'm not a huge Thrawn fan, but like I see the appeal of the character and I know how important those books are to Star Wars and to Star Wars fans. So like when, I mean, even not being like a super huge Thrawn fan, like when that was announced, like I felt it with like the hardcore fans. Like I was like, that's awesome. Like that's great. And I truly believe the same thing is going to happen with some elements of KOTOR. I think at some point there will be Old Republic stuff from Disney. And I think it's going to pick and choose. It's not going to be exactly KOTOR. It's not going to be exactly Tales of the Jedi. It's not going to be exactly the Old Republic. But I do think we are going to get some of that in Disney Star Wars for sure.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because part of me is wondering, like, again, I haven't played Knights of the Old Republic, but some elements of it seem to me almost like too close to the original trilogy era. Like some of the technology and way things like ships and stuff look and that sort of thing is like almost like too similar. And I wonder if they do go back to sort of the Old Republic and that sort of era, if it would be, I don't know, like almost more fantasy based, like things made out of wood and, but I guess they have to have space travel basically, no matter what. So they kind of like, I don't know. I'm just curious how much would be similar and how much would be like really kind of, let's make something that looks completely different. Cause I don't feel like, tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I don't feel like Knights of the Old Republic like really looks like completely, like it's a completely different, just like, cause it's supposed to be thousands and thousands of years before the original trilogy era, but I don't know that it looks like thousands of years previous, does it?
So yeah, that's an interesting point, and they talk about that in the book, like the idea of like cavemen with lightsabers is I think like the quote when people are trying to figure out like what to make of this era.
I'm thinking more like Game of Thrones era characters with lightsabers, medieval characters with lightsabers than cavemen,
yeah. And so like the vibe I've always gotten from KOTOR is, and this is like how I felt about it, like it's impossible for me to see it with like fresh eyes at this point, but like I remember looking at it like the first time I played it and it felt like a mix of the OT and the prequels, because there are some elements that are super shiny and like sleek and look like that sort of like 60s sci-fi, but then there's other elements that are extremely like used universe kind of thing that we saw in the prequels.
And that's an interesting consideration too. Like what does the past look like in Star Wars? Because, from the original trilogy to the prequel trilogy, like really what the past looks like is the future. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, but I don't think that would really apply so much to Knights of the Old Republic or to the Old Republic era. But I guess, you do have to kind of question certain elements like that. So, but that, man, how interesting would it be to talk to somebody like Alex if they do end up announcing Knights of the Old, or not Knights of the Old Republic, but that those guys Benioff and Weiss are doing would they use the term Old Republic, and that sort of thing. But I don't know, we'll see. Again, I would be so excited to hear just what they're doing. And it'll be really interesting to find out how much influence there is. And I think even without that, we know that this game is really influential and really important, but to see, I can't even imagine how validating that would be to people. Because like Thrawn coming back in Rebels was such a big deal. Mm-hmm. Like this would be 10 times that, you know what I mean? If there were really tangible, clearly defined, components of this Knights of the Old Republic series showing up in a movie, like the next big Star Wars movie, I feel like that would just be like mind blowing for fans of the game,
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know how I would react to that. Like that. Yeah. I mean, like we've had so many years of like wishful thinking around that, and I think that's also like a testament to like how much people love KOTOR. Is like, I mean, immediately when, like as you mentioned, immediately when they talked about new Star Wars with the Disney buyout, like people were like, are we going to get the Old Republic? Like,
yeah.
People love it, and it's important to a lot of fans of both Star Wars and video games. It's important to fans of like BioWare and Obsidian. It's important to, as Alex mentioned in the interview, it's important to a lot of people working at Lucasfilm. the game is, and like the setting spreads even more so because that's important to tabletop role-playing fans. It's important to you know, Dark Horse Comics fans. I think it's a tough place for Lucasfilm to be in because there is this like frothing demand for it. Like people want this so bad, but you have to do it right. You have to do it in a way that connects with everything that's happening now. And you know, it can't just be a retread either, because then, you know, something will be slightly different and people will be like, well, this is, you know, this was better in 2003. Like, what's the point of this? So yeah, that's a tricky spot to be in.
Yeah, I think it would make the most sense to kind of, you know, pull specific elements and even characters, but to change them and you know, flip certain expectations on their heads and things like that. Sort of like with Thrawn, you know, I don't know that things were really, you know, expectations were flipped necessarily, but it wasn't like we'll just pull Thrawn out and everything that was true about his life and story and everything from before will still be true now. And, you know, things were definitely different. I mean, yeah, things are definitely different. So I think that would be the way to do it. And I would like to see if Benioff and Weiss are doing a Old Republic era movie, or if somebody is, you know, or when somebody finally does, I'd like to see them kind of make it their own thing and just, you know, kind of bring in and nod to and draw inspiration from, you know, either the game or the comics or the, you know, the role-playing game, any whatever, all that stuff. I'd just like to see you know, things be pulled in versus like adapting, you know, one of those things. I don't think that's the right way to go. But so okay, so let's say like somebody like me has not played this game and wants to play it now. What is the easiest, sort of best, like it hasn't really been re-released, has it? So like how do you go about playing this game in 2019?
So it's available on, like, if you're on PC, it's available on Steam, I think GOG. There was an iOS port. I don't know if there was an Android port. And I can't say anything about that. I haven't played that. I'm not sure how the game works with you know, touch controls and everything. Can't really say one way or another. The way I played it most recently, because I played about like 10 to 15 hours. I was going to try to do a whole game playthrough, was my intention before reading the book, but it became very clear very early on that that was not going to happen. But I played 10 to 15 hours, and I played it on it's backwards compatible on Xbox One. I played it on the Xbox One X, which on a 4K TV. So with original Xbox games, it upscales them to 4K. So like it's a very, very like clean and crisp picture, and like the frame rate is like pretty locked. There's not really like frame rate dips and stuff, but I think, like, you know, if you have a, you know, a PC or Mac, I think there's a Mac version as well.
Yeah, it's available on the Mac App Store for $9.99.
Okay, so I think if you have like a PC that's like roughly as powerful as an Xbox One X, you're going to get like that same sort of experience. But I think, you know, for me, just being able to like sit on my couch, the game is free if you're subscribed to Xbox Game Pass. I still have a disc copy, so I could have played it that way, but it was like way easier for me to just play it on Game Pass because I didn't have to put a disc in. So yeah, for me, that was the way I played, and it was like a great experience. You do have to, and I said this like when I was talking to Alex, like you need to approach it as a 3D, early 3D video game version of a tabletop RPG, because everything that's happening there, even though like there's a lot of animation and stuff, everything that's happening there is based on like D20 die rolls. So like when you think about it in those terms, then it like, to me it like makes more sense, because I had to kind of reacclimate myself to that sort of gameplay, because like, you know, like the RPGs I've been playing in like the last five years or so have been like Witcher 3 and, you know, Skyrim and Final Fantasy 15, like these sort of like Xenoblade, like these modern, super modern RPGs that like kind of trim some of the, I don't know if you want, depending on your perspective, either fat or depth from like the original roots of, you know, RPGs, which is like the tabletop RPG. And so like you do kind of have to like reframe it in your mind. But once I sort of did that and kind of reacclimated myself, like I, you know, it still provides a really engaging and also like really unique in 2019 experience.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have an Xbox, so that sounds like the best way to do it. The Mac version has not been updated in 8 years, so I'm not sure that it would have the 4K support and stuff like that. But yeah. No, I don't know. I think maybe what I would recommend is to pick up a copy of the book and to read the book. Although the only problem with that, I guess, is that there is a sort of a big twist in the game storyline wise, and you know, I actually did not know. I knew about some of the characters in the game and knew about their importance, I guess, to fans, but like I didn't know the twists, and there's not really a way for Alex to put this book together and not kind of reveal what that twist is. So,
Yeah.
So now I know, and I don't think that would really bother me very much if I was to go back and play the game now. I mean, part of the thing is like if you played this game as you did, Ryan, when it came out, then I'm sure that twist was pretty shocking and pretty exciting and all that sort of thing. But there's not really a way to play a game from 2003 in 2019 and have it have sort of the same impact that it had on people in 2003 anyway. So, you know, I don't know that that's really that big of a deal, but I was just going to say maybe the best thing to do would be to, you know, grab a copy of the book, read the book, and then if it sounds like a game you want to play, then track down, you know, one of the ways you can play the game now in 2019. And I think I'd still stand by that unless you're somebody who's really, really going to be concerned about having, you know, parts of the story spoiled. To me, that's not that big of a deal with something that's 16 plus years old. But
yeah, I think like the reason to because I asked Alex the same question in the interview, like, you know, kind of, you know, what do you say to people who like haven't played the game? Like, he recommended watching a story playthrough on YouTube, because you can get like pretty much the whole story in about like two and a half hours, which I've never really dove into, but that's an option for sure. I would say like if you're if you want to know more about the game as like a Star Wars fan, just read the book.
Yeah.
Like that's going to tell you everything you need to know about why KOTOR is important. If you are a video game history fan, if you're a Bioware fan, if you're someone who just wants to experience a role-playing video game that lets you experience life in the Star Wars universe, because, you know, something that we haven't really talked about is this is a game that's full of choices. Like, you're making choices the entire game, and a lot of them, you know, there's the obvious light side, obvious dark side choices. Sometimes there's choices that are more challenging. And I think if you want to kind of, you know, get that sort of, you know, challenging life within the Star Wars universe like that, and I'm really trying to avoid the word gray here, but you know, you think about like The Last Jedi and how that film is filled with so many perspectives. Like, it's all about perspective, and yeah, like, God, the gray area. I'm just gonna say it. You know, if you want to get the experience of a complete story within the Star Wars universe where you are making tough choices throughout, then I would say, like, you know, you're going to have to deal with some like tech issues, and just like the like interface and tech has evolved a lot in video games since KOTOR, but the core experience that's there, I think, is still really powerful and really unique, because, you know, aside from KOTOR 2 and the Old Republic MMO, like, there's nothing really that you can to experience like that sort of life in the Star Wars universe outside of, you know, getting 4 or 5 people together and sitting down at a table and playing the tabletop RPG.
Right.
Like, I feel like this is the most accessible way to immerse yourself in the Star Wars universe, even if it is 4,000 years before, you know, Skywalkers, and even if it is technically Legends, like, it still gives you that core experience, which I think is really powerful and really unique even today.
Well said. Well said. Cool. All right. So our recommendation is either read the book and play the game, or read the book and just kind of, you know, feel the power of and the importance of this game, and you know, but from reading the book you'll know, sort of, with the caveat that we want to, you know, make sure everybody knows that, you know, when you read the book it's full of spoilers, so if you're concerned about that, then you'd play the game first, I guess. But yeah, I'm just really glad I read it, because like I said, it's not necessarily a game I want to play, or that I wanted to play before. You know, I'm definitely more considering it now than I was, but I think that it is important enough that, you know, if you're a major Star Wars fan, and you'd have to be to want to listen to our podcast, you know, you're not listening right now unless you're like a big Star Wars fan. Hey, this is not Star Wars for general audiences. That's not really what we do, Ryan. So you're a pretty big Star Wars fan if you're listening, and I think it's important
Congratulations.
enough. Yeah.
You passed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's the sword on either shoulder and all that. Yeah. No, but you know, I think it's like you owe it to yourself, if you're this invested in Star Wars, kind of owe it to yourself to track it down, and like I said, either read the book or play the game. So I think I've kind of said my piece on the game and on the book. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up here?
there's also kind of like the last connective tissue to modern Star Wars is a lot of the, not a lot, some of the voice actors who were in the game went on to do Star Wars animation. Kat Tabor, it was her first voice acting role. She played Mission in the game, and then she went on to play Padme.
Yep.
I was like thinking about pod racing. And
okay. Well, I'm always thinking about pod racing. A quick caveat or side note: there's a lot of people out there that inexplicably say Padme instead of Padme. Like, and it drives me crazy. Like, I'll be listening to podcasts and people are like, "Oh yeah, you know Padme," and I'm like, "Wait, you've seen the same movie I have, right?" They call her Padme like a million times. That's the only way anybody ever. And it's not a Lando. I mean, not a Han thing, you know, where some characters pronounce it differently. It's always Padme. But then, like, somebody will be like, "Oh, you know Padme," and I'm like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." So, anyway, yes, Kat Tabor played Padme in the Clone Wars.
And then if you're a Mass Effect fan, which I definitely am, Jennifer Hale, who played Bastila in KOTOR, went on to play Femshep, who is real Shep in the Mass Effect canon. Femshep is canon. Just throwing that out there. And so yeah, there's other people as well.
Sam Witwer.
Sam Witwer.
And what about D. Bradley Baker? Was he one or no? Oh. I feel like he's just in everything. So maybe I thought he was in Knights of the Old Republic, but
I don't know. James Arnold Taylor's probably in it. Who knows?
I didn't hear about that, but yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But Ed Asner, the Ed Asner story in the book is
read it.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into that.
Can't spoil it.
That was a highlight of the book, something I'd never heard before.
Yeah, it was good.
So that was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I've said my piece on KOTOR. I'm done.
All right, cool. Well, once again, Ryan, thanks for saving the day and getting that interview done with Alex when my computer and I guess my technology just would not cooperate. So we've got that for you here, and it's sort of bookended with Ryan and I doing what we always do, which is
ramble,
pontificating about Star Wars and the importance of. So yeah, and if you're interested in more of that, we will be back next week with another episode of the Blockade Runner podcast, and that will be leading right into Star Wars Celebration. So it's not long now, and I'm ridiculously hyped. We both got into the lottery today, although I might have screwed my portion of it up, but we'll see if I can.
Did it wrong.
You did it right. I think I did it wrong.
I don't know. We might have completely killed our odds.
No, we didn't do that. We didn't kill our odds, but it was a little confusing. So make sure you get in the lottery ASAP if you have a celebration badge and you're looking to go to some panels. But anyway, more podcasts on the horizon, and Star Wars Celebration is on the horizon very soon, and that could not be more exciting. Until then, you can keep up with everything we do at blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you at Blockade Runner Podcast. Okay, whoops, screwed that up, didn't I?
What is it?
No, I messed it up. Okay, so you you can find everything we do at blockaderunnerpodcast.com. You can get a hold of us or let us know, give us feedback at blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Twitter at Blockade Run. Ryan, you are on Twitter at Braun Dwarf.
BRAWNDWARF. And if you want to contact us on AOL Instant Messenger on AIM, our name's just Blockade Run X666.
All right. I hope you're going to sign into AOL and actually create that account now that you said that. So
I don't think
we were like 2 seconds away from giving Alex our AIM account information tonight, and let's try see if we can do the interview that way. You know? Yeah. Luckily, we didn't get to that point, but yeah. Boy. All right. Blockade Runner 97 in the can. We'll be back next week with Blockade Runner episode 98. Thanks very much for watching, and listening, and we will catch you next time.